Okay, so this is a presentation meant for the symposium on ethics, ecology, and aesthetics that was taking place in Ljubljana University, at the Ljubljana University in April 2026. And in my presentation, I would like to talk about this inherent relation of ethics, aesthetics, and ecology in East Asian philosophies, on exemplifying it with the notion of the childlike heart mind that was shaped or established by the late neo-Confucian thinker Li Zhi. But before I begin with introducing Li Zhi and his philosophy, I would just like to say a few words about the motivation of this very paper that underlies this presentation. It is, of course, we know that ecology, at least, is one of the most important contemporary crises that are marked by the fact that they are global crises, which means that they cannot be resolved in the narrow confines of particular nation states or region. Resolving them means establishing inclusive and genuine and egalitarian transcultural dialogue. And this is only possible in planetary discourse. And of course, we know that especially East Asian traditions allegedly have a disposal or can offer us many ideas that are connected to certain principles that can be very useful when we think about a new global ecological ethics, or even better, planetary ecological ethics. So if we, and therefore it is of no coincidence that many scholars, not only scholars of East Asian philosophies, but also other scholars, researchers, theoreticians, were starting in the last decade to search in East Asian ideational traditions for answers or for some recipes that could help us resolve this crisis. Because if we are talking about transcultural dialogue, of course, it is an egalitarian transcultural dialogue, is one that takes into account also non-European or non-dominant traditions of thought. And since East Asian traditions allegedly, or at the first sight, they can offer us a lot of ideas that are very useful in this regard. So it is not a coincidence that many many scholars started to look in these discourses to find some useful principles or ideas. But the problem is that most of this searching was embedded into a wider discourse, which is dangerous and negative in my view, because first of all, it is essentialistic, because it understands the notion of culture or a cultural region as some static essence-bearing entity, which means that in this essentialistic way, those ideas are necessarily decontextualized. That means they are taken out of their original historical contexts and referential frameworks, which means that they are also being modified in a sense that they can be used as some recipes. Of course, we cannot look in the East Asian traditions for any kind of recipes which would help us resolve today's crisis, because these ancient masters who were their authors, they could not anticipate the extent and not the qualitative mode of these problems that are challenging humanity today. So in this way, these principles were seen as some ready-made solutions to present-day ecological problems, but because they were manipulated in this way, they became some dangerously romanticized projections, and what is even worse, some idealized counter-images of modernity. And of course, this is not the goal we are having in this regard, but because we need to reject the myth that ancient societies were inherently more harmonious with nature, or that environmental degradation is an exclusively modern phenomenon. Of course, it is not, because environmental manipulation and destruction, interventions into nature, manipulations of nature are as old as humanity. And even East Asian history, and especially maybe Chinese history offers us ample evidence of this continuity across both pre-modern and modern periods. Nevertheless, we must know that pre-modern interventions into nature are qualitatively different from modern interventions, because pre-modern interventions into nature were relatively linear, were based upon direct and relatively linear uses of natural resources. And their goal was mostly simply human survival or human subsistence or other clearly delimited ends. But after the Industrial Revolution, when the political and economic systems of modern societies became modified in a way that these systems were based on the accumulation of capital, accumulation of product, and the economic system of production and reproduction was based on, or has been based on the production of surplus value, which leads, of course, first of all, to the inherently to a kind of imbalance. And imbalance is, of course, as we all can imagine, something that is very dangerous for our planetary existence and for the environment. But this imbalance is embedded in its very logic and constitutes a precondition for its ongoing operation and expansion. So from this perspective, of course, this exploitation of nature is not in modern time is not only based on increased quantity of exploitation, because due to the higher level of technology, but it is a qualitative different exploitation than the one we could speak of in traditional societies, in pre-modern, in pre-industrial societies. So from this perspective, contemporary ecological crises are rooted as much in long-standing conceptual and normative assumptions as in technological or purely economic developments. And these conceptual and normative assumptions are something that did not develop in a conceptual vacuum. In many problems that are connected to ecology are based on the subject-object division, which we can trace back in European philosophy to Plato and his very fixed, very static division line between the ideas and the phenomena on the other side. And also this division, which is something very different from an embeddedness from human beings into nature. This division is also visible later on in the development of the Cartesian dualisms and the dialectics in which the both antipoles were placed in a mutually exclusive and contradictory relations, as in the Hegelian dialectics. But they were also embedded in many prevailing monotheistic religions, starting, of course, with Christianity, which is the most important and the most widely spread religion in the Western world. So we can also see that in this religion, human beings, which were made actually according to the image of God, they were supposed to be masters of nature. They were supposed to make the nature serve themselves, and they were seen as absolutely superior to the rest of the nature. So, and we can find many quotations for this fact also in some parts of the Christian Bible. So, can East Asian traditions of thought offer us some other paradigms that are different than this anthropocentric principle we have just mentioned? Yes, I think they do, but instead of, as already mentioned, seeking solutions in East Asian traditions, we can engage them as critical conceptual resources. We can engage them not as something that would miraculously give us a recipe how to solve the ecological problems of our age, but as tools that can help us widening our conceptual horizon in this regard. So widening these conceptual horizons means that they make it easier for us to rethink our own attitude towards the relationship between ourselves and nature. And this can be seen as an inspiration that can really help us in this critically acclaimed way to rethink these relationships and to start about establishing, constituting some different ways of some different models of the ecological ethics for the planetary era. So, but what is then what are those different models, different ideas that can be seen as useful in this regard? I think we can talk here at least about two paradigms. The first one is the relational paradigm, which is something that is oriented directly in opposition with this fixed division line between subject and object. And also relationism is very important because today's ecological problems can only be resolved, as already mentioned, in an inclusive transcultural dialogue. So this relationism is actually imported in two ways. And then the second paradigm that is part of many East Asian traditions, also the Chinese tradition of thought, the Chinese philosophy, is the paradigm of balance, of equilibrium. which can be traced back to the Book of Changes, and which is very important, of course, if we talk about new paradigms of new ecological thinking. And it is directed against this production, continuous need of producing the surplus value, which, as we can see, can lead naturally or automatically to, it puts the world, the societies into an imbalanced, into a tension upon which then the production, the social production is taking place. So this is ethics, ecology, and of course there is also an underlying corresponding aesthetic, because in the aesthetic experience that was described and also produced in East Asian aesthetic philosophy, or also in art, it also understands the human beings and their perception of the external world in a very similar way, namely in a way that that feels them and also evaluates them as a inherent part of nature or of the universe. But speaking about this relational ethics, I would like to return to this relational ethics. It is this relationism is something that manifests itself in the most clear and also the most famous way in the original Confucian ethics of relations. And of course, it can be also widened to the relation between human beings and nature. But now this holistic perspective is facing severe criticism, not only from the Western scholars, but also to some more critically oriented Chinese and East Asian scholars, who say that this kind of holistic unity in which everything is connected to everything else, allegedly, that it naturally or automatically leads to a suppression of the human subject, their autonomy, their free will, their critical thinking, and so on. Well, and I would like to emphasize that this is not at all true. It doesn't apply for all Chinese or East Asian philosophies. Maybe to some of them, especially the ones that on the basis of which the Chinese state doctrine was made, but for the most original philosophies, also Confucian, this is not true. And this is why I would like to show the example of Li Zhi here and his childlike heart-mind concept, because because we can see very clearly from this example that free subjectivity must not be necessarily suppressed by this holistic approach. On the contrary, we can also imagine a theoretically concise and theoretically coherent system in which this holistic relationism is not in contrast with free subjectivity, but on the contrary, the free subjectivity in a dynamic way can origin from this holistic model. And this is a very clearly, we can see that in the conceptualization, Li Zhi's conceptualization of Tongxin. So, but let's begin with his philosophy. It is marked by strong aversion of any kind of objective truth. So on the first glimpse, he is very relativistic. Also in the moral sense, he opposes strongly the interpretation of Confucius as somebody who would offer us some fixed moral criteria for human behavior. He says, Li Zhi says this is not true. These criteria must be situational and also or behavior or judgments of good and evil must be situational and contextual. And there is no fixed criteria in this sense. It is a matter of our free will to decide in each situation what is okay and what is not okay. And also this very fierce criticism or very strong aversion against any kind of objective truth was in his philosophy also connected to his fierce criticism against ontological monism, which was in vogue at that time among many neo-Confucian philosophers. It was very fashionable. It was Zhou Dunyi, for instance. We can see the ontological monism in the Zhou Dunyin's principle of Taiji, the ultimate reality, or in Juxi's interpretation of the structural pattern Li, which was seen by him as really a monistic ontological ground of existence, because it was all embracing and all encompassing. Li Zhi, and many, this is also important because many Western and also Chinese theoreticians criticize this ontological monism of the neo-Confucian philosophy, that it was also an ontological basis for political philosophy with its unity of a unified state that was also, of course, necessarily relatively autocratic and a state that was based on the interests of the one absolute ruler. So I do not know whether this connection between ontology and political philosophy was so clear for Li Zhi, but anyway, he was very much against it. He always emphasized that any generation of existence can only proceed from dynamic interaction and exchange between two poles of existence. It cannot origin from one single origin. And what is here also very important is the fact that he saw this relationship between two antipoles, two oppositional notions as not hierarchical, but the generation can only took place generating anything, any existence in the cosmos can only take place through an egalitarian interaction between these two oppositional notions. So, and this is also reflected, for instance, in his view of the relationship between men and women, and his feminist view. We can see it also in this quotation, which is so nice that I'm going to read it, although it is a bit long. Well, he says, "Yesterday I heard a grand doctrine claiming that women are short-sighted and therefore unfit to study the way. Is that truly so? Truly so? Now, women do not leave the inner quarters, while men are given a mulberry wood bows and reed arrows to shoot in all four directions. That there are differences in how far each of them can see hardly needs to be said. But what is here called short-sightedness refers to seeing no further than the confines of the women's quarters, whereas farsightedness consists in deeply discerning the open and luminous expanse. I respectfully claim that when one speaks of the length or shortness of vision, it should be judged in this way, and not simply by taking women's vision as short. To say that there are men and women is acceptable, but to say that vision itself is male or female, how could that be acceptable? To say that there is long and short vision is acceptable. But to say that man's vision is entirely long and women's entirely short, how could that be acceptable? So, yeah, I like this passage very much because it clarifies with very strong emphasis that it shows this traditional Confucian social constructivism, because the Confucians were in any relations always strongly opposing any biologistic explanations of reality, and were always emphasizing the important role of education, the important role of socialization in the shaping of human being. And Li Zhi, of course, is here no exception. So there is also, and he widened, you see, this egalitarian view of the relationship between men and women, also to other social relationships like people, like sages and common people, pure and impure. So all these beings, all these human beings were equally worth in his view. Also, there were no axiological differences between members of different social strata or classes. And also, this was then also widened to nature, to the universe. So he always emphasized this anti-anthropocentric vision that every being, every entity in the universe is equal. There is nothing which is superior to human beings or nothing which is inferior in respect to them. And also not only animals were seen as equal in this, morally equal in this axiological way, but also grasses and plants and so on. So, and this egalitarian spirit was actually something that manifested itself also in the aesthetic groundworks of his philosophy, because it was embedded into the notion of Tongxin, childlike heart mind, which was also a kind of, among other things, a kind of epistemological principle, a kind of aesthetic principle, because it was something that allows, or in his view, of course, that allows us human beings to perceive the external reality as something of which we are a part, and something which is also a part of us. So, on the other hand, this notion, it is very clear that it is based on a positive evaluation of freedom of individual personality, which leads, in Li Zhi's view, then also to the elevation of humaneness. So he wrote about the notion of Tongxin in a separate essay in an independent essay with the same title. And he defines it in the introduction section of this title in the following way. He describes it. The childlike heart mind is utterly free of falsity and purely genuine. It is the original heart mind of the very first thought. If one loses the childlike heart mind, one thereby loses the true heart mind, and losing the true heart mind, one thereby loses the true person. So this is some kind of primordial, really original, unspoiled heart mind, unspoiled consciousness, unspoiled receptivity also, but we cannot mix this up with some kind of naive and utterly unknowable tabula rasa experience. The childlike heart mind is not a notion that would be in any kind of contradiction to the accumulation of knowledge, to education, to reading books, to taking one's socialization as a mean to for establishing a mature moral personality. It was why, on the contrary, it was very Li Zhi has valued very positive as a true Confucian, of course, the education, reading books, socialization. But what was important, this childlike heart mind was childlike in the sense of an openness. It was open to everything that could be imposed upon us, but this openness at the same time also meant some critical stance. So it is us, originally us, who are evaluating anything that comes from the external world, and in preserving the childlike heart mind, we actually preserve our critical and open mind. Losing the childlike heart mind, the Tongxin, on the other hand, means that we have allowed some doctrines, some unproven doctrines, some ideologies to manipulate us. And this happens normally if we want to follow our egocentric desires, in the sense that we change our behavior because we want to please some people that are from which we expect some favors, for instance. So losing this free and autonomous and also morally grounded free will meant for Li Zhi to lose the Tongxin, or heart mind, or childlike heart mind. It meant at the same time that we lost our authenticity, that we lost our true person. And losing this true person meant at the same time that we became phony. So he writes, once a person has become phony, there is nothing that is not phony. Hence, speaking phony words to phony people delights them. Describing phony affairs to phony people enchants them. Discussing phony writings with phony people pleases them. When everything is phony, there is nothing that does not delight them. Every space is filled with falsity, a whole scene of petty flattery and sophistry, right? So, and this can also be projected into the way of how we treat nature and naturalness within ourselves and outside ourselves. So, what is called natural, he says, does not mean deliberately striving to be natural and thereby taking it to be natural. If one deliberately aims at being natural, how is that different from artificial contrivance? So, if we want to preserve the nature, we need to preserve our Tongxin, our original heart mind. If we want to serve the planet, we cannot serve it by listening to some externally imposed moral obligations, because we need to seek for this principle, of course, within ourselves, within our Tongxin, because only then we can become aware of the fact that serving the planet eventually means serving ourselves. So we are not saving the planet, not serving, saving the planet, because the planet does not need to be saved by us. The planet can, of course, survive, and the universe can survive just fine without human beings. So if we are talking about naturalness and also in the sense of saving something, we need to save ourselves in the first place. And with this humble hope, I will now conclude this presentation, and thank you for your listening.